Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak in support of Senator Plett's amendment on the message on Bill C-11. I really wish that we had more time to debate, because this is a topic that has engaged Canadians like few others. But the Trudeau government has decided to force this bill through, cutting off debate for its own political ends. First, they rammed it through the House of Commons, and now it's the Senate's turn. For all the crowing Senator Harder and Senator Gold have done in the past about the Trudeau government not using time allocation, it is ironic that the government has chosen to invoke it now on this bill about online censorship. We shouldn't be surprised, I suppose. This Trudeau government has routinely demonstrated its fear of the free and fair debate of challenging issues. It's kind of their default. Why accept further debate on an online censorship bill when you could just shut down debate unilaterally and then make changes that will work to your political advantage anyway? Why have a public inquiry into Beijing election interference when you could instead stage manage a longtime family friend and Trudeau Foundation member to do it for you in private? After all, we know how this Prime Minister admires basic efficiency. Too bad it's at the expense of the democratic right to the freedom of expression. But here we are. After the nearly 70 hours senators invested in close examination of Bill C-11 at committee, and after the additional time senators took to draft and discuss amendments, we are now at a crossroads in determining the future of this legislation. The Trudeau government considered our 26 Senate amendments, but they only accepted the most inconsequential ones. While the government did accept one of my own amendments to harmonize the definition of decision with that of the Telecommunications Act, it was certainly not even close to the most significant of those I had proposed at the Senate committee. The Trudeau-appointed senators at committee rejected two of my other much more substantive amendments that dealt with the meat of the bill, on the issues of discoverability and threshold. Now, the Trudeau government has rejected all of the most substantive amendments put forward by the Senate, even reasoned amendments like the one proposed by Senator Melville Deschênes and Senator Simons that would have explicitly removed user-generated content from the long reach of Bill C-11. Instead, this Trudeau government has asked senators and by extension Canadians to just trust us, to exempt user-generated content from their Bill C-11 plan. Of course, they refuse to put such assurance into the actual legislation where it would be binding. Instead, they have inserted a clause into the motion accompanying the Senate's message where it can and will be summarily ignored and forgotten. Senator Scott Tanis suggested this was a sufficient compromise. He said it contained enough quote-unquote breadcrumbs to protect users. I disagree. Honourable Senators, this is not good enough for Canadians. They want and deserve bread, not crumbs. The motion originally proposed by the Senate government leader read this way, quote, that the Senate take note of the Government of Canada's stated intent that Bill C-11 will not apply to user-generated digital content and its commitment to issue policy direction to the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission accordingly, unquote. Senator Tanis's suggested amendment, now passed, replaced the words stated intent with public assurance. Thus, it now states in that motion, quote, that the Senate take note of the Government of Canada's public assurance that Bill C-11 will not apply to user-generated digital content and its commitment to issue policy direction to the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission accordingly, unquote. Unfortunately, Honourable Senators, you can be publicly assured that promise won't amount to a hill of beans. It's no more than a legislative pinky swear for a government with a well-earned reputation for repeatedly breaking their own promises. I don't even have time to recount them all. There was the promise to never raise the carbon tax above $50 a tonne, broken. The promised $4.5 billion Canadian mental health transfer. Canadians haven't seen one red cent of that. Electoral reform, thrown overboard. How about the Liberal promise that we would have only 2 years of $10 billion deficits before returning to balance? Goodness knows the Trudeau government has blown the doors off that one. It just goes on and on. I think it's fair to say the only thing you can count on is that you just can't count on this Trudeau government to keep their word. Still, the 2019 Liberal election platform gives us a hint as to the Trudeau government's true intentions regarding this bill. Their 2019 platform stated that a Liberal government would, quote, move forward in our first year with legislation to take appropriate measures to ensure that all content providers, including internet giants, offer meaningful levels of Canadian content in their catalogues, contribute to the creation of Canadian content in both official languages, and promote this content and make it easily accessible on their platforms, unquote. From that description of all content providers, honourable senators, it sounds an awful lot like the Trudeau government and the Liberal Party never had an intention to exempt user-generated content creators from regulation. Why should we believe they will now? The Liberal government claims that because changing the Broadcasting Act was an electoral promise, senators have no right to delay passage of Bill C-11 now, but this is really overstating the issue. The election promise in the 2021 Liberal election platform was very vague. Perhaps this was intentional, given the backlash the government had encountered on Bill C-10, the precursor to Bill C-11. The 2021 platform stated that a Liberal government would, quote, within the first 100 days, reintroduce legislation to reform the Broadcasting Act to ensure foreign web giants contribute to the creation and promotion of Canadian stories and music, unquote. The Broadcasting Act hadn't been updated in 50 years. No doubt it was due for a refresh, especially given the rapid advancements in technology. However, the broad generic terms used to describe the promise in the Liberal 2021 election platform certainly gave no indication that they intended to regulate user-generated content, one of the most contentious issues arising from Bill C-11. In any case, claiming that the Senate must follow the Salisbury Convention now because Bill C-11 was explicitly an electoral promise is far-fetched at best. The Trudeau government and independent senators in this place frequently laud the amendments passed on bills in the Senate as evidence of their new system's efficacy. But most of the time, the Senate amendments are accepted by the Trudeau government. The ones that are accepted by the Trudeau government either originate with the government and are their way to clean up their shoddily drafted legislation at a late stage of the legislative process, or the amendments are inconsequential and uncontroversial. Rarely will the Trudeau government accept amendments that significantly alter their legislation, and that's what we've seen with Bill C-11. I've said it before and I'll say it again. That simply is not good enough. How many times have we heard independent senators state during debate, dissuading senators from passing amendments to government bills, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good? Honourable senators, in the Senate of Canada, we should strive to make legislation more perfect. That is quite literally our jobs. We don't have to attempt amendments only once and then throw up our hands when the government pushes back. While the government may still not accept Senate amendments that are sent back to the House of Commons twice, the upper chamber's insistence certainly makes the government sit up and take notice. Bill C-11 is important enough to Canadians that we should be doing that here. The Senate is well within its rights to insist on its amendments. As then Senator Government Leader Peter Harder stated in his paper on complementarity, quote, since 1960, 7 bills involved a decision by the Senate to insist on some or all of its amendments once the House had rejected them, unquote. We even have quite recent precedent for this. Some of you might remember that in 2018, the House of Commons rejected several Senate amendments on Bill C-49, an act to amend the Canada Transportation Act. But the Senate insisted on 2 of their amendments and sent the bill back to the House a second time. The House again refused, and the Senate deferred. The point is, honourable senators, that it is not unprecedented. And in the case of Bill C-11, it would be justified for us to insist a second time on our amendments. To the Trudeau-appointed independent senators in this chamber, you should demand better of the government that appointed you. If you are as independent as you claim to be, take this opportunity to push back again on this message from the House of Commons on behalf of Canadians. It is time to flex your muscles. Try it. You never know. You might like it. Honourable senators, if there is ever a time for the Senate to insist upon its amendments, Bill C-11 would be it. To acquiesce so easily to the Trudeau government in dismissing the Senate's substantial amendments on this bill is to disrespect the time and the work that the Senate Committee has done on Bill C-11. The government should not be meddling this way in the free expression of Canadians. This bill is a serious threat to the livelihoods of Canadian content creators. It could have the effect of stunting our cultural and entertainment industries on the world stage. Above all, it is an unnecessary and unprecedented impingement on the freedom of Canadians. With this in mind, I ask you to join me and vote to stand up for our Senate amendments for the good of all Canadians. Thank you.